Hello everyone, I hope you are all doing well. Today we are going to talk about the British Empire in the 18th century. This is the topic that we will be exploring in our group presentation. The 18th century was a period of remarkable growth and transformation for the British Empire. This era saw significant territorial expansion, economic prosperity driven by mercantilism and the Industrial Revolution, and numerous military conflicts that reshaped global power dynamics. In this presentation, there is a more detailed exploration of these aspects.
Expansion and colonization. 1. North America. 13 colonies. By the early 18th centuries, Britain has established the 13 colonies along the eastern coast of North America. These colonies stretch from Georgia in the south to New Hampshire in the north. Each colony had a unique economy based on local resources, including agriculture, fishing, timber, and trade. They operated under various forms of governance, from proprietary colonies like Pennsylvania to royal colonies directly controlled by the crown. Canada. Following the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, Britain gained control of Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, then called Acadia, and Hudson Bay, the conquest of New France, Quebec, in 1763. After the Seven Years' War solidified British control in Canada, these colonies stretched from Georgia in the south to New Hampshire in the north.
2. Caribbean. The British Caribbean colonies, including Jamaica, Barbados, the Bahamas, and the Leeward Islands, were key to the empire's wealth due to their plantations. The labor-intensive nature of sugar production led to the importation of a vast number of enslaved Africans, making the Caribbean one of the centers of the transatlantic slave trade. 3. India. The British East India Company played a central role in British expansion in India, following victories in battles like Plassey 1757 and Buxar 1764. The East India Company established itself as a dominant political and military force. The Regulating Act of 1773 and Pitt's India Act of 1784 were early attempts by the British government to control the company's administration and curb corruption.
Africa. British involvement in Africa during this period was primarily focused on the slave trade. With major trading posts established along the West African coast, these outposts facilitated the transatlantic slave trade, which supplied labor to the American and Caribbean colonies. These posts became hubs of the triangular trade that was crucial to the economic system of the British Empire. Pacific and Australia. Captain James Cook's voyages in the 1760s and the 1770s led to the British claim over Australia, New South Wales, and New Zealand. The establishment of penal colonies in Australia, starting with the first fleet arrived in Botany Bay in 1788, marking the beginning of British colonization in Australia. New South Wales became the foundation for further expansion into Australia.
Now we are going to continue with economic growth and trade. We can find mercantilism. The economic policy of mercantilism dominated British trade strategy, emphasizing the accumulation of wealth through a favorable balance of trade. Colonies were expected to supply raw materials and serve as markets for British manufacturing goods. Triangular trade. This system connects Europe, Africa, and the Americas, facilitating the exchange of goods, enslaved people, and raw materials. British ships transport manufacturing goods to Africa, exchanging them for enslaved people, who were then transferred to the Americas, where goods like sugar, tobacco, and cotton were brought back to Britain. Industrial Revolution. The late 18th century saw the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, leading to innovation in manufacturing and transportation. This industrial growth fueled economic expansion and increased demand for raw material from the colonies.
Military conflicts and diplomacy. 1. War of Spanish Succession, 1701-1714. This conflict saw Britain fighting against France and Spain to prevent the unification of the French and Spain throne. The Treaty of Utrecht in 1713 ended a war and significantly benefited Britain, which gained Gibraltar, Micronesia, and Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and trading rights in Spanish America. 2. Seven Years' War 1765-1763. Often considered the global war, the conflict pitted Britain against France in Europe, North America, and India. The war ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1763, significantly expanding British territories, especially in the North America and India.
3. American Revolutionary War from 1775 to 1783. The 13 colonies' struggle for independence led to the American Revolutionary War. This war began as a colonial rebellion against British rule, driven by issues like taxation without representation and British interference in colonial affairs.
Governance and administration. Colonial administration. The governance of the colonies varied widely. Some, like the 13 colonies, had significant self-government, while others were directly administered by royal governors. The British East India Company acted as the de facto government in its Indian territories. The administration of the colonies aimed to maximize economic benefits for Britain while maintaining control.
Social and cultural impact. Migration. The 18th century saw significant migration within the empire, including the forced migration of enslaved Africans. Settlers from Britain and other parts of Europe moved to colonies in the Americas, the Caribbean, and later Australia. Enslaved Africans were forcibly transported to Americans. Cultural exchange. The empire facilitated a global exchange of ideas, goods, and cultural practices. This period saw the spread of English as a global language, the introduction of British legal and educational system, and the exchange of agricultural products and technologies.
Key figures. Robert Cliff, 1725-1774. Also known as Cliff of India, he was instrumental of establishing British control over India. His victory at the end of the Battle of Plassey in 1767 was a turning point that allowed the British East India Company to dominate Bengal. William Pitt the Elder, 1708-1778. As Prime Minister during the March of the Seven Years' War, he was a driving force behind Britain's military strategy and territorial expansion. George III, 1708-1778. As Prime Minister during much of the Seven Years' War, he was a driving force behind Britain's military strategy and territorial expansion.